All right, Drive Radio fans, we are at Universal Oil. I've been talking about this for a while. We've done a complete tour of the facility. We did that yesterday, toured the refinery. We'll talk about that today as we continue to go through these videos. But we really want you to watch each video. We'll try to keep these concise and easy to watch, but in some cases they may get a little long. I'd still encourage you to watch those, especially if you're really interested about oil, how it affects your vehicle, just all the different things. And we've got so much information. We'll do our best to cover it all. We're going to do our best to even get these guys from Universal to start calling in on the show on a routine basis, because this is a evolving market. This does not stay the same on an ongoing basis. And with me today, I've got Gary Schaefer, who's the sales director, and Rick Palmore, who's VP of sales. And actually, Dan, show him Dan. Dan's actually the reason we're out here in the first place. So Dan McMahon, and he's the regional sales manager, and Dan's actually the one that kind of put all this together, so my hat's off to Dan to actually making this work. So he's the guy really that we can thank for making this all possible for those of you that are watching. So I'm not going to intro every video. You can watch this one as the first segment, and then we'll just continue to go through. And as you guys know that have been watching, we're by no means professional, so please forgive us if we mess up. They're not professionals either. We're car guys, and you guys know me. I'm your radio host, and we're experts when it comes to how to keep your car running and maintained. But outside of that, these guys are the oil experts, so I really wanted to get them on and talk. And so, guys, welcome. And I know we've got tons to talk about, and we've been talking for the last half hour, 45 minutes about different things and different topics and so on. So I'm really just going to give you guys the floor, and I thought we'll just kind of go step by step through different things you guys do here. There's a lot of products you guys carry. Richard, show them the real quick, the box, the eco product. We'll talk about that through one of these segments. That's a very sustainable end of things that you guys do. In fact, that's what the refinery is that we went and looked at while we were here. We'll talk about that. I don't want to steal your thunder, so we'll kind of get into that. But guys, the floor is yours. Where do you want to start?
Well, tell you what, John, let's lay a foundation of where we're coming from and where we started at. So Universal Lubricants has been around since 1929. Okay. And kind of put that in perspective, we've been blending and compounding our line of lubricants that long and laying out to where we were one of the first multi-vis engine oils west of the Mississippi. Okay. Universal was founded on building heavy-duty lubricants, off-road applications, construction, dirt movers, farming, fleet type information or type products.
I want to stop for just 1 second, because some of our listeners may not know this. Us old guys in the room probably do, but at one point in time, there was no multi-viscosity oil. Absolutely. Everything, you either put a 30 weight, 40 weight, 50 weight, and that's just the way things were built back in the old days.
You changed in the season. Yeah, when it was colder, you went to the lighter vest. When it got hotter, you went to the heavier vest. And I started in 1985, and I can still remember, even in the southern states in 1985, 30 and 40 weights were the biggest movers. Kind of give you an example, we were a Pennzoil distributor at that time, and they would literally sell truckloads of 30 weight in the winter down in the southern parts of the United States, and even going into Mexico. And then when the summer came along, they would switch it and they would sell truckloads of 40 weights. So it's you are right, engine oil has evolved, and that's one of the things that we started looking at Universal. As we started evolving as a company, we started getting our passenger car being a bigger part of our business, and started looking at ways to approach that segment. And you talked about you got to visit the refinery yesterday, and that is one of the reasons why we got drug into the passenger car business. But before we make that step into there, in 29 years that I've been here, that you start looking at engines evolving, you start looking at car dealerships asking for different types of product, you start looking at lube centers starting coming online, and I can remember when there was only 4 lube centers in the state of Kansas. Right. We first started as it grown. So as technology requirements come along, as the engine manufacturers put more demand on your lubricants, then the technology's got to follow that, and you have to advance right.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a question that I've had, and I'm sure some of our listeners do too, which is, it's kind of the old, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So what came first when it came to, the oil becoming a multi-viscosity, and now we have so many different oil choices, it's even hard to stock bulk oil because of how many different requirements there are for vehicles. What drove what? Did the multi-viscosity come first and then drive engine manufacturers to retool and make things differently on the engine side, or was it the engine side changing and getting higher tech that forced you guys to do different work on your end?
In our business, Doug, great question. In our business, the engine manufacturers dictate what we're going to do.
Okay.
Now, a great example on multi-vis is that, and everybody will know that the most common wear that happens in an engine in passenger car is startup. So you have to have cold crankability, and as you start looking at that, you have to lower the viscosity to be able to get the product from the crankcase to the top of the engine as the fastest possible way to start lubricating. And because right now, if you start two dry parts up, they're going to rub together.
Right.
And as the engine sets, the oil flows from the top of the engine back down to the bottom.
And just starts that process all over again.
Absolutely.
So to your point, the cold start, and even in today's modern engine, the cold start is still where the majority of the wear on an engine comes from. It's not running that thing down the road at 80 mile an hour when it's nice and steady and the heat is built up and all of that. It's that first thing in the morning, firing up the engine. And there's a misconception, I think, there, because I've heard it even on our show, and I think even some of us, gearhead types, and you guys talked about a seminar you just put on recently with shop owners where there's even some misconceptions from shop owners. But in the old days, you always thought thicker was better.
Correct.
But that's not true in today's modern engines, is it?
No, you're right on. And just exactly what you said is that you start looking at that smaller the number, the lower the viscosity, the thinner the oil. The higher the number, the thicker the viscosity of the engine oil. So, and we've had those turned around, a lot of misconceptions. You start looking at that. Now, to pull away from what you talked about, the engine manufacturer, I had to have that cold cranking start. But now when I do get it up to idle speed or up to operating speed, or heck, what if I start pulling a trailer? Or what if I start putting a turbocharge and I start getting more power out of my engine? Now I do have to have it thicker. Now I've got to have that thicker engine oil to be able to lubricate when the heat hits and when the stress hits and that deal. So now when the engine manufacturers started talking about that, how can you create oil to go from that cold crank, which when we start terminology is early morning startup, we call it cold crank. Right. And then when you start going into the volatility issue, or the thicker the oil to be able to seal once or cool once the engine gets heated up, that's the volatility. So you have to lay out an engine oil to be able to meet cold crank specifications and volatility specifications and be able to operate in those temperature ranges. And that's where, when technology really started moving, is when the VI improver started being built. And that's the VI stands for viscosity index improver. You got to be able to move from the lower part of the count on the viscosity grade to the higher part of the count of the viscosity grade.
0-30 weight. You've got to be able to move from 0 to 30.
Right. You're right. And it's as the engine manufacturers demanded to be able to start up earlier, be able to heat up when you started pulling and started putting stress on the engines and really heat. We always use this terminology, or even this visual mindset, to start thinking about the older cars that you used to ride around in, and you saw it almost looked like a 2x4 opening for grills in the front of the car to allow wind to come in to be able to cool the engine down. And now if you look at the new body styles, you may have a 6-inch window, or to go in.
And some that open and close.
Absolutely.
In fact, that's one of the standards for the new CAFE ratings coming in 2025 will be if a manufacturer has the ability to close and open vents on the front to help with aerodynamics, but it also has to do with cooling. They actually get bonus points on their CAFE ratings if they're able to do some of those things.
You're actually hitting right there on what there's three segments to the chicken or the egg, really. It's did the oil make the engines change? Did the engines make the oil change? It's actually the government mandated standards that's made the engines change, that's made the oils change. So we're being pulled along actually by federal regulations that change CAFE standards on mileage, pollution standards, things like that have
even some of the additives and add packs that you guys have in the oils, I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing even some of the regulations have changed what you're able to even put in the oil itself. Zinc, for example, has been, for the most part, removed from oil. Some of that's due to catalytic converters and other things that have come along, but again, some of those mandates have made those things change.
And you're right, zinc's a natural lubricity additive. And so when you put an add pack, you got to find something to be able to offset what zinc does.
Got it.
So that's the reason why you had that. Now zinc will also be tears the catalytic converters up, and when you start doing emissions. And Gary's right, when you start looking at what the government CAFE requirements are, there's no hidden fact that the thinner the motor oil, the less resistance you have, which will give you better gas mileage.
You know what, that's a great segue. Hold that thought. Let's take a quick break real fast, and we'll come right back, but stay tuned. John Rush, Drive Radio, and we'll be back in just a second.